What's up, guys? It's TechnoViking23 coming to you today with some Mass Effect Andromeda commentary, and today we're actually going to discuss the development hell that plagued Mass Effect Andromeda and turned it into one of the most disappointing releases in recent memory. Of course, Bioware started working on Mass Effect Andromeda way back in 2012, right after they had finished Mass Effect 3, and they decided they wanted to make a new game in the series, one that was going to take us to different locations and just give us a different experience. And they had a little bit of trouble with that, it would appear. Now, an article recently came out written by Jason Schreler over at Kotaku. He's actually one of Kotaku's more reputable, I guess, authors. Some people, as soon as they hear Kotaku, immediately dismiss things, and I understand they're not a great gaming publication, but every once in a while they do produce some gems. They were very good on some of the Destiny leaks and reporting a lot of the stuff that went on with Destiny. And as I'm reading through this, and I've read several other sources throughout the internet, the more and more I look at it, the more and more Andromeda's development seems almost like what happened with Bungie and Activision, and why the first Destiny was kind of lackluster when it first came out. And obviously Andromeda was not a great game when it first released. And just overall, there had to be something behind the scenes going on. I know I commented on it in some of my videos where there were a lot of developers that kept leaving the team, a lot of major developers who left the team, senior writers and other people who seem to be in very high positions who all of a sudden just decided to up and leave. And that usually does not bode well for a game's development when it happens. But Jason Schreler in this article really goes into detail about some of the things that went on between the studios. Of course, Andromeda was made by Bioware Montreal. Bioware's more famous studio is Bioware Edmonton, which produced most of the original Mass Effect trilogy, which a lot of us would say was a pretty good gaming series. It's one of my favorite gaming series of all time, and Andromeda just failed to kind of live up to its predecessor in most fashions. Now, there were a lot of issues with the game when it came out, a lot of bugs, a lot of problems. We obviously all know the facial animation problems that came out with Andromeda, and the game did not do very well financially either for EA, and that's something as someone who invests and is involved in financial things, I often listen in on investor calls with some of these major gaming companies because it allows me to provide a little bit more insight in some of my videos. And the EA investor call was they were not very happy with the results of Andromeda. And as some people have reported, and it's been, I think the rumor's pretty much been confirmed at this point, but they've essentially shuttered EA Montreal when it comes to working on Andromeda. There really aren't any plans going forward with Mass Effect at this point in time. They're kind of putting the series on the back burner to focus on Anthem, which is Bioware Edmonton's big project that was announced at E3, which I have a separate video coming on later. The game looks really, really interesting and really cool. But we'll see if Bioware can redeem themselves after Andromeda. But they didn't give Andromeda any coverage at E3. A lot of people were thinking we might see something about some single-player DLC. I've done a separate video where I said let's not even worry about single-player DLC because it's probably not coming. You're probably not going to see it because they've essentially reduced Bioware's team to a very small team to work on the multiplayer and to patch individual items in the game. There was a nice patch that came out about a week or so ago where they fixed some of the problems with the facial animations, and they added a little bit of an updated character creator, which you can access through the Tempest now. And I jumped on there and played for a little bit and messed around with it, and it was nice, and it made you able to create some nicer-looking characters. But overall, it wasn't like a huge groundbreaking improvement to the game. It wasn't anything super special. So for right now, they're essentially just working on the multiplayer, balancing the multiplayer. Any new content that comes for the game is probably going to be very simple things they can make to put into Apex multiplayer. You're not going to see any major story-driven DLC packages, which is unfortunate because there were a lot of open storylines left in this game. And I really thought that despite Andromeda being a little lackluster at first, that it could really benefit from some DLC. Kind of the way Dragon Age Inquisition did. Dragon Age Inquisition was not an amazing game to me. It was a good game for a while. I got bored of it, but I really did enjoy the DLC. They did a really good job with the DLC. There was a lot of content there. For its price, it was very reasonable, and I was hoping we would see that with Andromeda, but that does not seem to be the case at this point. But this article goes on to talk about a lot of the stuff that happened. There seems to be a lot of infighting at Bioware. Bioware Montreal appeared to be inexperienced in making a game of this magnitude, and instead of trying to own up to that, they essentially just decided to blame everyone else. Apparently, they were blaming Bioware Edmonton for stealing ideas from Andromeda for their Anthem game, which is pretty interesting. And Andromeda also went through a major redevelopment phase just before the game came out. When they were first designing the game, they wanted to focus on exploration, which is one of the key things they talk about in a lot of the trailers. And they wanted to get back to sort of the roots of the first Mass Effect game, but improve upon everything. You know, obviously Mass Effect exploration was kind of dull and boring. You could just drive around a planet and find minerals and side missions and things. But it was, at the time the game came out, it was pretty cool. It was pretty unique. And a lot of people, there's a love-or-hate relationship with the Mako. And they talk about how they wanted to improve upon that and make driving around more enjoyable and not feel quite as cumbersome. And they wanted to give you a lot of stuff to do on these planets. They actually at one point wanted to do procedurally generated planets similar to No Man's Sky. And the whole thing of the original game was going to have like 40 or 50 planets that you could go explore and have all kinds of stuff to do on them, all kinds of things to find. And then they found there were some issues when they were using the Frostbite engine when it came to doing exploration and RPG type things. It was great for the combat, which you can see that in the game. The combat in Andromeda is really, really good. And Frostbite's a really solid engine for that. But apparently the development team at Montreal just did not have the resources, did not have the expertise to mold it into working for a third-person, type RPG game, which is kind of concerning for Anthem because they're apparently doing the same thing with Anthem. They're going to use the Frostbite engine and, making a third-person adventure game, so to speak. But yeah, it just looks like this game went through a lot of problems, especially with Bioware Montreal. It just does not seem that they were able to really get their act together. It didn't seem like they could really focus on anything and make it work. They had a lot of technical problems. They had a lot of issues with money coming in to help them out. And just overall, when you have to restart development on a game right before it's coming out, that's not really a good thing at all. And it just makes you wonder what some of these developers and what some of these publishing companies really are thinking when they develop these games, when they have so many problems. You almost wish they would take a little bit longer time and just make a nice polished product that comes out. And they had a lot of problems with the Frostbite engine. They had to go out and make all these little custom programs to get it to work. And they had to borrow some of the stuff the Dragon Age Inquisition team did with their game. Although Dragon Age Inquisition, I think, accomplished it much better. There's a lot of concept screenshots and art that came out of the game, what it originally looked like, and it looks amazing. It looks beautiful, but they kind of shelved all of that and decided they didn't want to use it for some reason. And a lot of the developers are talking about how it was also a struggle to build the maps on Frostbite, where the map size they struggled with it. They needed the maps to be bigger than what they were, and they couldn't get the save system to work with some of the maps, and they just had a lot of problems, and they just couldn't get it figured out in time. And like I said, that's one of the things where, if you're not going to have the game ready to go, take a little bit extra time, delay it if you have to. And of course, like I mentioned before, there were the developers that left. Casey Hudson left Bioware. Gerard Lahani left Bioware. They brought in Mac Walters, who was one of their longtime writers, to try to serve as the new creative director. And that totally shifted the direction they wanted to go with the story and the game, and brought them an entirely new vision. And that was in 2014, right in the middle of the development. And they decided, okay, we're gonna change this, because they didn't want to do the exploration anymore. They decided they were going to chop it down to only have 4 or 5 explorable planets, which is what we got in the game. That's a lot less than what a lot of us thought we were going to get in the game, and really just causes a lot of confusion among the development team when you bring in new people in the middle and realize it's not going to work. And that kind of goes back to the procedural generation they initially wanted to do. They didn't figure out until late 2015 that it wasn't going to work out and that they needed to change it. So they really only worked on the version of Andromeda we got for a little over a year and a half, if that. So they started to chop out a bunch of the content. They had to redesign a lot of things from the ground up, and they had to do it in a very panicked fashion. And there was a lot of stuff that didn't make it into the final game because of this. A lot of the gameplay mechanics, they said, the multiplayer and the combat, and the driving, all things that Frostbite does well and all things EA is pretty good at developing in addition to Bioware, they had it done pretty early on. But the problem was their cinematics were bad, the content wasn't finished, they had a lot of issues with the animations with Frostbite, and we obviously saw that when we played the game early on. And it was just really challenging for them, apparently, to get any of this done. And they were very, very, very far behind schedule. And I guess Bioware actually put as many people as they could, even borrowing some staff from their other places, to get the game finished. And we know that a lot of the stuff was pulled from other Mass Effect games that unfortunately didn't make it into Andromeda, especially the squad control, being able to focus on your squad's abilities, change their loadouts. And it just seems like they didn't have any direction at all when they were making this game. It's a very interesting thing to read about and see just how lacking in vision they were and how they just changed their mind so many times. There's one of the developers that was interviewed says that the actual game itself wasn't truly developed until the final 18 months or so of a 5-year development cycle. That is pretty bad. And they were very panicked. They were rushing to get it finished. And they just felt like there was a lot of regression from the prior games in the final development stages. They weren't able to actually polish the game, which is something I've mentioned in a lot of my reviews, where it seems like Andromeda could have really benefited from another 6 months of polish and just work. A lot of the stuff that came at launch would just not have been there. And it's something that they could have definitely fixed ahead of time. So just really interesting. And what I'll do is I'll post up this article so you can go and read it and check out some of the problems they had. But there was just a lot of infighting at Bioware, a lot of problems within Bioware, it seems. And they just went through kind of a development hell, similar to what Destiny went through with Bungie and Activision. Although if you read through this, it doesn't seem like EA really had too many problems. It seemed mostly a Bioware thing where there was a lot of infighting between their studios. And just that never works out very well for anybody involved. It definitely doesn't work out well for the players. Although there's one thing I do want to talk about, and I think this actually hurt Andromeda just as bad as some of the problems that happened during its development, and that was the free trial. They let people play. They allowed, if any of you guys played through it, you were allowed to play about 10 hours of the game, whether it was multiplayer or single player. You could play through the first little bits of the game. And I'm actually kind of glad that they did this, because this is something that you wouldn't expect from somebody like EA, is they basically let you experience the finished product. And a lot of people went through that, and they decided, wow, this game is really not good. There's a lot of bugs, there's a lot of glaring problems, there's a lot of facial animation issues. And then all the memes started coming out, all the things making fun of the game, like this is a AAA game, look at how bad some of the animations are. And that really hurt the game's sales. I'm sure a lot of people probably canceled their pre-order after playing through the 10-hour free trial. Or not the free trial, but I think you had to be a member of EA Origin Access. It's like $5, but it was worth it. If you're going to spend $5 to play a game for 10 hours and decide if you want to spend $60 on it or not, it was worth it to me. I actually, through the trial, surprisingly decided to get the game, and I've enjoyed most of my time in Andromeda, but I will agree with the majority of the reviews that it's just not a very good Mass Effect game. There's just too many issues that plague the game to call it a great game or a good game. But still solid overall, and I've definitely put my time into it. But it's not a game I see myself playing through again. But I want to give kudos to EA a little bit for doing that. That was a big risk, because they took a very large financial hit because of that. If they had not allowed a free trial or a beta, so to speak, of Andromeda, their pre-orders and their sales would probably been a lot better than what they wound up being. But I'm sure, like I said, because of the free trial, they probably lost a lot of pre-orders and a lot of sales by doing that. So I'd like to see more studios do that. It's going to hurt their bottom line a little bit, but it benefits the consumer. It benefits us as a gamer. So it would appear that most of the problems with Mass Effect Andromeda fall squarely at BioWare Montreal's feet. And if you read some of the stuff that's been coming out since, you know, they do appear to be playing the blame game a lot, blaming other people other than themselves. So it's really unfortunate. And as of right now, there really are no hopes for a sequel, which sucks because there's a lot of things they could have learned from. There's a lot of storylines that need to be tied up. But there's just not much hope here for another Mass Effect game anytime soon. We will see what Anthem does. That's going to be BioWare's next game, which I've got another video on you can check out. And a game that looks somewhat promising, but of course we'll have to wait and see. BioWare's reputation is definitely stained. In my opinion, they've been on a downhill slide for the last couple of years. They used to be one of my most trusted developers. A developer I always thought I would enjoy their games, but we're coming to a point in time now where that is sort of coming to an end, I guess. You know, they set out to do something really, really ambitious with Andromeda, something we were all really excited for, all very hopeful for, and they failed utterly. They blew up on the launch pad. They didn't make it. So, really unfortunate. But there's always a story to it. You always find out later on. You know, with Destiny, it came out in the Marty O'Donnell lawsuit. We got to read a lot about the issues that went on there and see what happened with that game's development. Aliens Colonial Marines was a huge disaster. I wish I'd been on YouTube when that came out so I could cover some of that stuff, because that was one of my most anticipated games in my lifetime, and to see all the crap that happened in its development, it would have been fun to kind of talk about that one too. But it's funny how all these stories always come out a couple months after the game's released and the game hasn't done well, or even if the game has done well, like in Destiny's case, you see exactly what happened, you know, within the structure within. It's really cool to kind of see. You know, even Bungie, when they were making the Halo games, had a lot of infighting and a lot of problems in their studio, especially with Halo 2, but somehow they managed to grind it out and still put out a pretty good game. And at the end of the day, that's what these developers need to focus on. You know, putting out something that the consumer will enjoy and will get their money's worth. So, anyways, guys, that's going to do it for me. Like I said, I'll link that article down below so you can read it in the description. Let me know what your thoughts are. You know, if do you still trust BioWare to create a new game? Do you think they can fix some of the problems that are in Andromeda? Do you ever think we'll actually see story DLC for this game? Because I certainly don't. But either way, let me know down below in the comments. As usual, I hope you guys are having a great day. As always, thank you for watching, and I will see you again next time.